Ladies and gentlemen, the JDXA. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Dillio coming to you live with another video. And this is, once again, another keyboard that I couldn't quite get my hands on when it first came out. And this keyboard isn't from such a long time ago, but I just couldn't quite buy it. But I actually really wanted to get a hold of it because this was during the time, if I recall correctly, this was during the time when Roland came out with this one and the JDXA, and then I think around that same time, Chord came out with the 4-voice analog. And I think this was during the emergent times of them trying to bring back more analog synthesizers. I remember when the Minilog was a really big deal, not because it was just analog, but because it had 4 voices of analog. You know, it almost like seems like we were all scraping for more than one voice in analog at the time. Of course, Moogs were all monophonic at that time, the most recent ones. And, you know, having that 4-voice capability was really cool. Now, the interesting thing about this was that this also gave you 4 voices of analog synthesis, okay? And also kind of like a 64 to 128 voice. We're going to look at the specification in a second, but this also combined an analog 4-voice synthesizer with a digital multi-timbral synthesizer as well. Not necessarily multi-timbral, I have to check the specs again, but you almost had like a digital wavetable part, and then you had an analog part that you can mix together to make sounds like that. This also has a sequencer in it and some really cool stuff. So we're going to dive into this board and look at some things, look at some presets, look at some things I made. We're going to look at the Talkbox. We're going to look at the Vocoder. We're going to look at all that in the video. So stay tuned for that. Let's go to the screen and let's check out the specs, and also let's check out how much this thing costs. Some of the specifications from vintagesynth.com. 4 voices analog, 64 voices on its digital side, and inside of the oscillators, or inside the analog voices, you had 2 digitally controlled analog oscillators with multiple waveforms: sine, triangle, wave, pulse width. Pretty much the standard things you would get with most analog synthesizers today. You got 5 different filters, 2 LFOs, MIDI in and out, 16-track sequencer, arpeggiator. You got definitely some nice sounding effects on here. 49-key bed, which is good, and memory of 256, and also USB flash memory of 256 as well. So this was a pretty cool release, and I believe this was released in 2015, so not that long ago, about 5 years ago. And it has a decent sound. It kind of has sort of like a wave, kind of a dated wavetable sound to me, but the analog sounds good as well. But it's a good sound, but it still, you can kind of hear that wavetable sound in it. So let's dive in further to that situation there. Let's see how much it costs. As you can see on reverb.com, this keyboard still can fetch a pretty good penny for it. Almost $2,000. You usually get around $1,350, $1,398, $980, $1,200. So, you know, you just got to kind of shop around if you want to make a purchase on this type of keyboard right here. But as you can see, this is like the brand new price right here. Almost $2,000 for this board. Yeah, that's probably why I didn't purchase it at the time when it was brand new. I couldn't justify what it did with the price of it. I just couldn't do it. So while it was a pretty expensive keyboard when it first came out, it was still a very advanced keyboard, some great sounds on it. This is a good synthesizer brass sound right here. Good responsive, and I like the key bed, nice full-size keys. However, the chassis is a little bit kind of on the plasticky side. It kind of has a very lightweight plastic size, even though it has a very imposing look with the red lights coming through the knobs and the faders on this thing. But it still kind of had kind of like that plastically sheen, and in a dark place, it's very hard to like see what the text is unless you have a good light source shining down on it. So if you're at a gig or a show and you're in the dark, hopefully you got everything on presets, because if you're trying to reach out and see what the settings are, unless you know them by heart, you're going to be struggling a little bit. But otherwise, it's a really cool synthesizer. So once again, I like the way that the synthesizer is laid out when you can see it. You got the LFOs. You can select which analog parts you want. You got 4 analog voices there that you can use in a poly stack, or you can separate them. Also in the digital part, you got 4 digital parts there. They all tap into that 64 note digital polyphony. So you got digital 64 notes plus the 40. You can work together and mix and match sounds together. So it's a nice mixture between the two. Obviously, you got extra control because you got two mod wheels here. You got a more of a Yamaha style pitch bend and modulation wheel up here, and then you have the standard Roland kind of joystick modulation control system right there. Two LFOs, they're on using the same knobs, and then you got oscillator 1 and then oscillator 2. And obviously, if you select the digital part, certain parts of the keyboard will not be lit to kind of indicate to you that, hey, you're on a digital part. These knobs won't affect it because it's just two different things. It's a wave table. So you're not going to get two analog oscillators inside of a wave table, but you will get it on an analog part. So that's a cool thing, and obviously you can select which part you want to work with there. So let's check out some presets that I designed. Of course, the first thing I want to do on any analog synthesizer is design a bass sound. So I just go to my same Dillie Snap Funk bass preset. And what I like about this versus playing on the Moog, even in the Moog has full-size keyboards, and they actually updated this to have more forgiving keys because the keys on this unit are very springy, so you have to really push it down. But you got same thing we can find like on the other video I was doing with the MIDI chord. And it's very easy to do a slide. You got nice full keys. It definitely feels more rewarding to play on larger keys than smaller keys. I suppose each has their advantage or their disadvantage, but me personally, I just like, if I'm doing synthesizer stuff and I gotta move quick, I like some full keys that aren't too springy, aren't too strong, and aren't too fragile. Once again, you know, you kind of want to make sure you have this thing in a hard case. If you're dropping almost $2,000 for it brand new, to have this thing in a hard case so you can transport it, not damage the knobs, it kind of has a delicate feel to me, even though it has a big synthesizer engine in it. You don't want to tear this thing up. So that's like a bass patch that I did. This is more like a pad sound I did. And what I'm having going on in this one, two different things. I got an LFO going on one of the digital parts, and then I have another digital part going on another digital part there. So on part 1, I have kind of like that pulsing with some reverb sprinkled in on it. And then I have sort of this pad. When you mix those two together, sounds pretty. And in sound design, the first thing that I compare this to is the Minilogue, which is also a 4-voice analog synthesizer. And between these two, if you were to just run everything dry and just use basic LFOs and just use the basic infrastructure of the oscillators, you do get a pretty similar sound between the two. I mean, there's not much you can really do about the math. And most of the time in keyboards that are from different brands, they all have their own special filters. So even Chord has their own special filters. Moogs, Yamahas, especially on the analog front, they all have their own special filters that shape the sound and give it its own character. But if you take that out of the equation and just layer an oscillator on top of each other, they sound pretty much exactly alike. But for me, it's more pleasing to play this one. However, this one costs less. You got smaller keys, but you still can make things happen, but it's still a smaller sort of thing going on there. So they'll sound exactly like, so if you want to make a fat bass on here, you can, but you can also do the same thing on this one. However, if you want to get on the pads and get to more of the sound design, obviously you're going beyond the analog limits. And that plays a different, but then also, if you think about the effects like the Minilogue, and I'm comparing the Minilogue to this because it's right here. The Minilogue effects on here, you have like a digital delay on there. It gets kind of noisy. Not nosy, but noisy. I'm sorry, analog delay on here, which gives you a little bit of a delay, but it's not as advanced as like having a nice digital delay block that gives you all kinds of effects, the standards, chords, flames, phaser, delay, reverb, hall, radio, whatever you want. There are a lot of advanced effects in this block at the end of your signal chain that you simply won't have on a mini log. And now, like I said, I'm just picking on these two because these are right there in front of me, and I could tell you if I had another keyboard in front of me, I could tell you some different things. Singing with them, that would sound different. But just that extra reverb makes things a lot of fun. Standard chord progression I always play, and so that is really cool. I like that sound design aspect of it. Definitely pleasing to the ear. However, sometimes I do feel like the wavetable sounds can get a little dark to me, and it just feels like on this platform you have to really dig for the wavetables and then really take time to shape them and to mold them into the sounds that you want to design for, which for me is a little bit more easier on the computer. But on this platform, if this is all in front of you, the advantage of this is that this is all you have in front of you to look at, and you feel like you're driving a spaceship. So I can just look at this and focus on more on what it sounds than what it looks like. And I think we definitely got away from that working on computers, because we're looking at waveforms, we're looking at information, and we're engaging our eyes more than our ears. And even though we're in more of a visual society with the media today, I think sometimes it's easier to get more creative. We're able to zone out what you're seeing and focus solely on what you're hearing. So we're going to browse some more presets. So this is fully digital, so none of the analog voices are activated. Very interesting sound there. Kind of like a bold glass. I love pads. And I definitely love a lot of the pads that are coming on Roland devices. They really have a great pad sound library in a lot of their keyboards. And the interesting thing about this is that you get pretty much probably 16 banks of 16 sounds in each bank. However, when you get past bank D and you get into bank E, that's where you start to get into the initialized patches. And what that means is that it's totally blanked out. There's nothing on there. And you can design your own sound from scratch, which is where I like to get in and get my hands dirty. Now, to follow up with one of the questions that was asked about me in another video, why I didn't hook up the vocoder on the microKORG when I had it in the studio, was because it took a 1/4 inch input and I really didn't want to go find a cable. I had a nice XLR with a microphone ready to set to go, and I just want to plug in and let life be easy. This keyboard enables life to be easy. Why? Because it has an actual XLR input on the back of it with an input level control, and that enables me to dive right in and play with some of the vocoder effects. So now I'm going to actually show you some of the vocoder effects that you can do on this one and talk about what's going on in the board. But I'm going to use this microphone instead of my headset microphone to talk about what's going on. All right, so now I'm using this microphone here, which is hooked up to an XLR input on this keyboard, and we're going to dive into the vocoding effects on here. And I have an analog patch set up, a basic analog patch. I actually have the vocoder bypass to pass this microphone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the vocoder. You're going to hear my voice filtered through the vocoder and carried by the sound that I designed on the keyboard. Test 1, 2, 3. Of course, you got to make sure you hit the vocoder button to make sure it works.
Test 1, 2, 3, yeah. Now you're hearing me on the vocoder, yeah, yeah. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, 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 yeah. Ooh, yeah, check out the vocoder of the JDXA, yeah.
So as you can see, you can hear a little bit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of color to it. So I'm going to activate the second oscillator, and I'm going to kind of detune a little bit. Okay. Add a little drive, bring a little boost in that. Now let's check out the vocoder now.
You are now hearing a robot. You are hearing a more advanced sound. Yeah. Oh yeah, oh yeah. This is the vocoder. This is the vocoder. This is the vocoder. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So as you can see, adding more color kind of adds more character to the vocoder. So now let's see what happens if I enable a poly stack, tapping into the 4 analog voices to see if we can create chords.
Oh, this is the vocoder with 4 voices activated from the analog synthesizer. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Do you remember how we used to get the groove on the dance floor? Come on, dance on the dance floor, dance floor. Dance, dance on the dance floor.
So even hearing it through the microphone and hearing it through the vocoder, there's not a lot of high range that I hear in the vocoder. It still does the job, but I would like it to be a little bit more clearer. Of course, if I added more noise from the oscillator blocks, or even added a digital part, because it doesn't just add vocoder to the analog parts, it does it to the digital part. But I just wanted to kind of demonstrate to you the functionality of using that through the vocoder. And as you can see, the microphone comes through perfectly fine through this board. But up next, let's check out how you can use a Talkbox with it. Okay, so the final test is the Talkbox. This is obviously a great synthesizer, Talkbox with. I mean, you can go all the way up and all the way down. So I'm just going to Talkbox with it and show you how it sounds. It pretty much will sound like any other Talkbox. But I just want to show you that this board can do it too.
Oh, we are taking over. We are taking over. We are taking over. Nothing's gonna stop us. Over, over. Ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh. Oh. Ooh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So top boxing works with this thing. The pitch bend is lightning fast. The keys are lightning responsive, great for playing and doing synth leads and solo lines on it and bass lines, chording. It's overall a balanced keyboard. However, once again, I think it's a good keyboard, but I don't know if it's $2,000 worth brand new type of keyboard. But you know, you find it a good price for it used. It definitely could be a nice investment if you're looking for a nice full length synthesizer to talk box with or design sounds with. There's a lot of great possibilities on it. I do feel like sonically there's a little bit of a limitation to it on the wavetable side, and you know you're gonna feel lacking when you have only 4 voices and you have like 48 keys and you only have only 4 analog voices to work with. It kind of leaves you kind of wanting to do more. Otherwise, this is a very impressive looking keyboard, and I really like it. And also the sequencer on this thing is pretty cool as well, pretty easy to get into. Not going to go into that too much on this video, but I was able to sit down with it and play some notes and sequence it and stuff like that. And it's a very in-depth sequencer. However, because you don't really have a lot of visual feedback, so you have to really mess with it for a while to kind of keep in track in your mind what's going on inside the keyboard as you sequence with it. So, you know, it's a trade-off with that, but otherwise it's a pretty cool setup. So that's the JDXA. If you like this type of stuff, let me know in the video. And also, once again, tell me your story. Do you have a story with the JDXA in your life as a musician or a music producer? Did you have this keyboard? Did you sell it? Let me know what you think about this keyboard in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video. This is Dillio, representing DillioT2K.com. I'm out.
Dillio on the track.